Layoffs are in the news of late, and how might that affect your retirement plan? Well, here to talk with me about that is Bo Kemp from Sensible Money. Bo, welcome.
Hi, Bob. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you here. So layoffs are seemingly happening everywhere.
Well, it's very interesting because, on one hand, the economic data tells us that unemployment's low and there's plentiful of jobs. There's so many jobs out there for us to pursue if we want them. But then you also get bombarded by these alerts from mainly a lot of them are tech companies saying, "Oh, they're laying off X thousand of employees," and so it's I think what's happening is people are starting to see in their company, whatever wherever they're working, that could actually be a possibility for them, even if they haven't seen it yet. And then others are seeing fellow colleagues that are getting laid off, and so a lot of this is just, I mean, nothing's it kind of feels normal at this point, right? The past couple of years, everything's just kind of chaotic in a way, and so this just adds a little fuel to that fire that we have going on.
Yeah. So, in terms of people's financial plans, retirement plans, what do they need to think about in light of this current environment?
It's funny because it's the classic answer from a financial advisor is it always depends, and so it really does. And if you're early, we'll just touch briefly on early to mid career because if you're in that stage of life, it's a different problem, right? And so it's more of, do you have, like every financial advisor they bring up, do you have that emergency fund saved? And if you do, this is why you have it in the event that were to happen. Generally, that advice is 3 to 6 months. I personally would rather you see get closer to 12 months, especially if you're in that industry. Be realistic with yourself. If you're in an industry and a job that, even if it's not a layoff, but say you're more sales oriented, where those sales could get cut in half. So just be prepared for that. And also just find ways to make yourself more valuable. That's your you yourself is your biggest asset at this point. And so whether it's better communication, learning how to be a better leader and manager in the firm, or there's a certification you can go out and get. There's all sorts of ways in every industry to make yourself more valuable, to the company, to make it a little bit harder for them to lay you off if you can. And then also, this is good advice I think all the time, but don't bite off more than you can chew. So you're growing, you're making more money now than you probably ever have. You want to go buy that next new house or the next newest truck. Maybe it's one of the battery operated ones now that it seems to cost another mortgage at this point. But it's, do you really need it right now? And so it's really just don't strap yourself into those big lumpy payments that in the event you were to lose some income that you can't handle.
Yeah. And this advice is great, Bo, because a lot of people, I think, are prone to some behavioral finance mistakes with respect to thinking that tomorrow will be the same as today. But that may not be the case in an environment where a layoff could happen at your company tomorrow or next month or whatever. What about people who might be in late career? What do they have to think about?
It's this. I see how this could be more fearful in a way because it's like you've ran the marathon. You can see the finish line, and then someone just threw in a new mountain for you to climb before you get to that finish line, right? And so it's you're so close. If you're like 5 to 10 years out from retirement, you might be counting down the days at this point. And there's a fear, especially when you're on the older end of the working age, of the working population. It's, well, if I were to get laid off, can I go find another job that pays me the same amount? And I personally, I'm not here to say if you can or can't. It's probably really dependent on the company that you're going to interview with next. But there is that fear, and it is the possibility that you likely, you might not be able to get the same paying job that you have now. And so, what I've been doing with people that have this fear, not that they've been laid off yet, but it's okay. What happens if I were to get laid off? We adjust the plan. We say, well, what happens if you make 50% of what you're making right now? And then 75%. And so we're just testing the plan with these different income levels, lower than what you're earning now, to kind of get the idea of, okay, if you were to have to do this, how much longer do you have to work until you can retire? And so everyone has that good plan in place, and there's always going to be adjustments to make. And so these are ways to prepare yourself for those adjustments so that it's not just a complete slap in the face, right? And so there's that aspect of it. There's also the whole we're testing your plan with different incomes. It's bringing your values, right? And so that's the type of planning I do for people that they want to maintain their lifestyle throughout their retirement. If you value retiring more than everything you're spending money on, so a lot of times you'll have discretionary spending. If you're willing to cut back, then you might still be able to retire at that same date.
Yeah.
It's just everything that we talk about is we have our things that we can control and our things that we can't. Income, to an extent, we can control. We can control how long we work. We might not be able to control how long the one company will keep us there, but then we can also control, for the most part, how much we spend as well.
Yeah. And what about with respect to someone's account and funding it and et cetera? How might they think about adjusting their savings or and that sort of thing?
It's a really interesting question I had asked because it's again, it depends on your age. And so if you're age 55 and beyond, I would say that the question was, should I adjust my employer contributions to start saving more in a non-retirement savings account? And in my opinion, it's if you're over age 55, you can always withdraw from that employer account penalty free. And so there's really no need to adjust those at that point. It's more of where is this money going and how is it being invested. So if you were to get laid off, is that money available versus is it in something in the stock market that could be volatile?
Yeah.
If you're younger than that, then yeah, it's something I would never recommend stopping them completely because a lot of times you have the company match that you want to take advantage of. But if you don't have that cash bucket saved, like I talked about for the early to mid-career people, then possibly do start building up your non-retirement savings, still contributing enough to get your match, possibly even more. It all depends on your finances and how everything's going with you. But those are the main thing to consider, I think, there is really your age and if you can withdraw from your employer accounts penalty-free.
Yeah. So on the one hand, we have to worry about the possibility of a layoff, but we're also still experiencing quite a bit of market volatility. We're talking on a day after the market, I think, went down 400 or so odd points.
It seems like every day it's up a couple percent or down a couple percent.
So what to do?
Yeah, it's really, again, I can't stress enough having the plan and being disciplined with the plan. So much of personal finance is behaviorally driven. It's really fascinating, actually, because you can think like, well, how risky is my portfolio? Unless you're invested in a bunch of individual stocks, or I should say more risky than that is a few individual stocks. But if you're invested in index funds and you've had a plan in place where you have some money invested, whether it's in cash money markets that actually earn something now, plus some fixed income, the volatility shouldn't be stressing you out too much. I know it's hard, but having it backed up by the plan should mitigate those fears a little bit. Yeah. And then it's also like, okay, so I have my cash bucket. I'm invested in my index funds. I get it, Bo. The market's going up and down, but what if it gets cut 50%? Again, early to mid-career, shouldn't affect you at all. If you're nearing retirement, you really should be planning your next 7 to 10 years of expenses out. So that's what we do is we build bond ladders with that. The first couple years, possibly in the money market, some CDs, and then you build out bonds. Those are all earning a really good amount now. You're getting 5% on some short-term bonds that you can buy. And so I think a lot of the fear gets driven by not truly understanding what you're investing in and why you've invested in it.
Yeah. I guess one of the things that people do need to think about, and you've mentioned it earlier about the ability to withdraw money from retirement accounts based on your age and whether there's a penalty or not. There's some certain ages where this might make sense to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you're within the age 55 to 59 and a half, you can start withdrawing from the employer account if you have to, and that's without the penalty. And so you'll still get taxed if it's the traditional, but that's going to carry with you throughout your entire retirement. Once you get above that age, you can start withdrawing from your IRAs penalty free as well. Yeah. And so that's why the age matters. If you're younger than that, non-retirement savings really mean a lot more. If all your money's in those employer accounts, then now you're getting taxed on the money plus a penalty. It costs a lot more to get those dollars out of that account.
Yeah. So we've covered quite a bit of ground. Anything we missed, or anything that sort of just bears reemphasizing or concluding remarks?
I think it's just that don't let the fear cause you to make irrational decisions. It's build your knowledge. Like, I mean, if you're watching videos like this, you're trying to build your knowledge and having that to where don't let the emotions dictate how you start to play with your portfolio. And so, if you have that plan in place, there's always going to be adjustments you have to make. This is just one of them, that potential for a layoff. But it makes it a lot easier to adjust when you do have that strong plan in place.
Yeah. But I think my sort of knee jerk to what you've described is this notion of people have a tendency to want to set it and forget it. But the truth of the matter is, you constantly have to make adjustments and sort of be mindful of the fact and diligent about watching and not overreacting, but not necessarily not reacting when times dictate an adjustment.
Yeah, exactly, and it's hard because I actually there was a study I had seen one time where it's if you look at your portfolio more than 4 times a year, you tend to be dissatisfied. Well, we always know what's happening because of all the technology we have now, and so it's just being mindful, like you're saying, of it's all the short term chaos shouldn't really affect my emotions right now.
Yeah. Well, Bo, as always, I want to thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us. It's greatly appreciated.
Yep. Thank you, Bob.